Hello everyone. I'm Tom Metcalf, a machine learning solutions architect here at Rasa, and on behalf of the team I just want to extend a very warm welcome to the Rasa X product launch announcement. It's been a really long road to get here, so we're really excited to be able to share some news with you today. But before I can get into all that really exciting news, I just have a very quick announcement. The Rasa Developer Summit 2019 is happening in September this year. Of course, the summit in 2018 was a really enjoyable, really successful event for us. So we're going to triple down on it this year. And we're hosting it in sunny San Francisco. We're going to have a lot of really exciting speakers. We've got Facebook, Lemonade, N26, Adobe, and of course ourselves. So you can sign up right now and buy tickets at rasa.com/summit. Okay, and as far as the agenda today, I'm going to pass it on very briefly in a second to Alan, our co-founder. He's just going to talk a little bit about the journey we've been taking building conversational AI and how Rasa X is the next step in that journey for us. And then Yusta, our head of developer relations, is going to demo some of the new features and just get hands-on with it. And I just want to briefly say, of course, at the end, we're going to be having a Q&A with some members of the team. So if you have any questions, then just type them in the chat. I'll be moderating the whole time. I'll be writing them down, and we'll cover them all at the very end there. So without any further ado, let me pass you over to Alan. And yeah.
Thanks, Tom. So the part of this part of the announcement is called "Why Algorithms Alone Won't Solve Conversational AI," and it's my pleasure to get to tell you about Rasa X and why we built it. And then after me, Yusta will show a bit about how to actually use the product. But this is more about the journey that got us there. So to tell you why we built Rasa X, I have to tell you why Rasa exists at all. And our mission is to create a world where AI assistants serve everybody and not just the customers of big tech companies. And to make that a reality, every maker has to have the best possible tools for building AI assistants. And that's why we're building the standard infrastructure layer for conversational AI. And we've been on this mission for a few years. It started off almost exactly 3 years ago. Alex and I were working in his kitchen, and we had a couple of Slack bots that we were building, and we just realized that this problem is really hard, right? Building conversational AI is a really tough problem. And we wrote this post outlining some of the problems that we saw that were kind of not yet solved. And this was very shortly before the Facebook Messenger platform opened up. And we kind of said, look, the world isn't ready for all these chatbots yet because all these things need to be resolved first. We see all these blockers in the way. And everything we've been doing since then has been about removing those blockers. So if you fast forward to today, we have this incredible open source community. We have over 500,000 downloads of the open source tools. We have thousands of people active in the forum, helping each other, answering questions. And we have developers in all sorts of different industries building amazing things with Rasa. And we would definitely not be where we are if it weren't for everyone who's contributed in the last few years. So thank you very much if you're a Rasa contributor. And I don't just mean people who've contributed code, also anyone who's given a talk about Rasa, written a blog post about it, helped their friend with it. All those contributions are extremely valuable. And if you're just getting started or you want to get involved and want to become a contributor to the Rasa project, check out our website. There's a Rasa contributor program with lots of information and lots of guidance on how to get started. So what's happened in the last 3 years? Well, there's been some progress and a lot of progress on the algorithm side of the problem. So the first thing we did after listing some of the problems that we saw was to write this blog post about how people could build their own NLP. And we did this because we were running the Bots Berlin meetup in Berlin, of course, for people who were building chatbots. And everyone was telling us that they wanted to become independent of Witted AI or Dialogflow or whatever they were using. And they wanted to kind of control their own destiny when it came to their NLU system. And so we said, okay, why don't we write some notes that people can use as a sort of guide to how they can build their own NLP. And the post got lots of read. People got very excited about it. But then we thought, why don't we take it one step further? And instead of everybody building this themselves, we can just open source a library, and then we can all contribute to the same code base rather than everybody building this themselves from scratch. And that seems to have been a good idea because people really picked it up and started using it, and we started to see the beginnings of this amazing community. And then a year later, we open sourced a library called Rasa Core. And that was our bet on how to make more scalable dialogue systems. How do you break free from having ever deeper nested if statements and trying to maintain a state machine that grows out of control over time? And it's been really incredible how many people have picked it up and been building cool things with it and pushing it to its limits. And we didn't just release the first versions of those libraries. In the past few years, there have been some meaningful changes to how they work internally. On the NLU side, we changed from a word embedding classification system for intents to a supervised word vector system, which removed a lot of the limitations of the original approach. And at the end of last year, we published a paper describing a new dialogue policy that we invented, which uses an attention mechanism to decide which parts of a conversation to take into account and which parts to ignore when predicting the next best action to take. And of course, there are lots of interesting things that have happened outside of Rasa. NLP is moving incredibly fast, and the cast of Sesame Street with Bert and Elmo being really popular models these days, showing that doing language model pre-training gives you much better representations than things like Word2Vec or Glove ever did. So there's been lots of progress on the algorithms, but the algorithm machine learning requires training data. And if you're a Rasa user, you'll know what training data looks like. You have your NLU data, you have your stories. And if you're a Rasa user today, hooking up to your production system and turning the conversations that your users have into real training data is a really hard thing to do. First, you have to configure Rasa to set up a persistent tracker store. Then you have to hook into that tracker store, export conversations, convert them into stories, fix them by editing the files by hand, copying them over, and then retraining the model. And so that's the limitation that we're trying to remove today. So everything, like I said, in the past few years has always been about sort of removing blockers that are preventing people from building better conversational software. And so I'm really happy to share Rasa X with you today. And Rasa X is all about learning from real conversations. That's really what it's for. So I'll show a quick demo of someone using the product. So you can see all your conversations, and you can filter them by intents or the length of the conversation to narrow down what you want to look at. And you can annotate those conversations. If you're not sure what to do yet, you can flag them so you can revisit them later. And you can take any conversation, move it into interactive learning, and take over on behalf of the user and fix any mistakes that Rasa NLU and Core make to create new stories. So you'll get a much more detailed intro from Yusta, where she'll show you lots of different things you can do with Rasa X. But that's really the most important thing. It's turning those real conversations into training data. Oh. So Rasa X sits alongside Rasa. So it doesn't replace any of the functionality that you have in Core and NLU, but it gives you new tools for viewing and annotating conversations, for getting feedback from test users, and for versioning and managing your models. And Rasa X costs $0, and it's available in early access today. So you can go and play with it right after this webinar. Now, one of the hardest problems in machine learning is knowing what something is and knowing what it's not, like knowing what's a hot dog and what's not a hot dog. So we're going to talk a little bit about Rasa X in that respect. Rasa X is a tool for learning from real conversations and improving your assistant. It is also totally optional. If you don't want to use it, you can keep using Rasa the way you have been. It's totally your choice. Rasa X is also not a hosted service. You run Rasa on your own machine and on your own servers. And it's also not intended to be an all-in-one point-and-click bot platform. We're not trying to replace things that you would normally write code for. Annotating conversations is something that's much easier in a UI, and that's why Rasa X offers a UI for that. But we're not trying to sort of replace things that are easier to do by just writing code. The second thing I get to tell you about today is Rasa 1.0. So previously we had two separate libraries called Rasa NLU and Rasa Core, and we've merged those into a single repo and a single package called Rasa. You can still use Rasa NLU and Rasa Core independently. The only difference is that we've put them in one repo to remove a lot of code duplication and improve usability. And the biggest change to your user experience is that we have a new and much simpler command line interface. So all Rasa projects now have a standard structure, and everyone who follows that structure doesn't have to pass any more flags in. You can just run simple commands like Rasa train, Rasa test, and Rasa run. So there will be many more versions of Rasa after 1.0, and Rasa X is just in early access. So it's just the start, and we're really excited for everyone to try it out and give us feedback, and we're excited to see what everybody builds with it. So I'll hand over to Juste, who is going to actually go ahead and show you how to use Rasa X.
All right. Thank you. Hello, everyone. I'm really excited about this next part in our live stream today, because this is where I get to actually show you how Rasa X works in action. So in general, why Rasa X is great from developer's perspective is because, as we always try to emphasize, when you build an AI assistant, it's important to not only build a development version of your bot, but to also allow your assistant to learn from real conversations. So it's important to give your assistant to real users as early as possible and reuse that real conversational data to improve your assistant over time. And with Rasa X, it's really easy to share your assistant with real users, and also to collect those conversations between real users and your assistant and actually use them to improve your bot. And this is what I'm going to show you today. I'm not going to show you a lot of slides, actually, because I'm actually going to do everything on a real existing assistant. As you can see, I have a bot already that is on my local machine. And if you're not a new Rasa user, you probably recognize some of the files, like, for example, domain file, data. I have some NLU and stories data in there. So basically, it's a really simple bot. It's called MoodBot, and the chances are that if you have used Rasa before and checked Rasa docs already, you actually spoke to this assistant as well. So this assistant simply asks how you feel, and if you are unhappy, then this assistant tries to cheer you up with a cute picture. So I'm going to show you how you can improve this assistant using real conversations. Because if you wanted, you could obviously use, for example, Rasa 1.0 and do everything in your command line. And then you can also, without using Rasa X, give it to the actual users, but then you have to deploy your assistant and then collect conversations in a tracker store, and then find out the way to actually reuse those conversations and relabel. But with Rasa X, it's actually much easier. And that's what I'm going to do. So now I'm in a Rasa X UI. It's really easy to start. Simply Rasa X command in your command line. And when you launch Rasa X, this is the window where you are the most likely to land at. And it's called Conversations tab in the Rasa X UI. It's a really important part of the Rasa X, because this is where all conversations between real users and your assistant will end up. Also, if you had some conversations in your tracker store that you collected before, it's also really easy to just simply load them in the Rasa X UI and then go through them, correct them, and create new training data that you can use to improve your assistant. So what's going on here? So I already allowed some users to talk to my mood bot before the stream, and I collected some of the conversations that they had with my assistant. And you can see that each conversation that each user had with my assistant is collected here, and every user is separate, and I have timestamps when the conversation happened as well. And now what I can do is to actually go through each of them and obviously learn what kind of things users talk to my assistant about, but also I can correct the mistakes that my NLU or core model made. So for example, here, a very short conversation, and I can fix some things already. So the user said, "Hey, which is an interesting way to say hi. And you can see that the prediction of the NLU model here is null. And it's not correct because it probably should have been something like greet or something like that. And I can easily fix that. I simply click on this hey message, and then I can correct intent very simply by selecting greet here. And then if I save it, this is a corrected example that will be added to my new training data that I can reuse to improve my assistant. And I can do the same with more conversations. So for example, this one looks good. So the user said hello, and assistant responded, hey, how are you? User said, I'm great, and everything looks okay. This one is also a really short conversation, and I have, I think, one more. Which was here. Yeah, so I have another one. So for example, the user said, hello, an assistant asked, hi, how are you? And the user said, good, which also corresponds to mood great, but instead the NLU model predicted label goodbye. And that's not correct. So the bot then started listening to the next user input. So the whole conversation kind of didn't work out. So you can either do corrections in the same way when you simply select the correct intent, but you can also move to interactive learning directly and continue the conversation there by correcting the mistakes as well. So for example, you can then assign the correct intent to the user input good, which is mood great, and then simply continue the conversation by also fixing if some specific actions are not predicted correctly. But in this case, everything looks great, and then you can basically add new conversational data to the data that you have, and you can use to improve your assistant. One more important and really useful thing about Conversations tab is that if, for example, you are unsure about some of the messages that you would like to correct at a specific point, you can easily flag them. So there is a little flag icon, and then once you do that, it will make it easy for you to get back to those conversations later on when you are ready to look into them again and decide what you want to do. And another really important and useful thing is that Conversations tab has a bunch of filters. So the ones that you already saw in that short video that Alan showed you. So if you have a lot of conversations here that you have to go through and check and label and correct, then you can use filters. For example, you can filter messages by date range or maximum confidence, or if you want to see only flagged messages or not, or for example, if you would like to see only conversations with specific number of user messages, you can also filter by that. So let's say I apply filter 2, and I think a few really short conversations were filtered out from the Conversations tab, and then I have only specific messages and conversations for me to look into. So it's really useful, and I believe that it makes it a lot easier to go through the new collected conversations and label them, correct them, and then use them to improve your bot. So once you're happy with the new conversational data that you would like to use to improve your assistant, you can actually go ahead and improve your model. So the next step would be going to the training tab, and here you can do a lot of things as well. One of them is you can look through the NLU data, because NLU model is also important. So all of the new inputs that users provide when they talk to your assistant, they will also be added here. So you can annotate the new NLU data here as well. So predictions for those new inputs will be made automatically, and you can either approve them if you are happy with the predictions, or you can correct them if something wasn't classified correctly. When you approve specific user messages as correct, then they will automatically be added to the actual training data of your assistant, alongside the one that maybe you generated yourself before. Another thing you can do in a training tab, you can see edit and remove and add new templates for the responses that your assistant will use to respond to specific user inputs when specific actions are predicted. You can also see stories here, so the ones that, for example, you generated in the first place when you started developing your assistant. And you can see there are a lot of interesting things here, and one of them is the flow. So you can see a visualization of each stories you have, and it just makes it a lot easier to see what flow and what conversational turns stories you have will cover. And you can obviously edit stories here and make changes, and then either add something to stories, write the new ones, and so on. And last but not least, you can also see the configuration of your NLU model, and you can change it and improve it and train the new models as you like. But one way or another, once you are happy with all the data files you have and configurations, it's time to train the model. In Rasa X UI, it's really easy to do. You just simply hit train. And then depending on how much training data you have, it will either take just a few seconds or maybe longer if you have more training data. One way or another, your trained model should end up in this models tab of your Rasa X UI. And while mine is taking a bit longer, but while it's still training, I will quickly talk you through what's happening here. So in Models tab of the Rasa X UI, you can do model versioning and management. So every single time you train a new model, it will appear here, and you will also get a timestamp when the model was trained. And the most important part about this tab is that you can choose which model runs in production. So for example, which model is being used when your assistant, when users are talking to your assistant. So you can switch to a new model. Let me maybe refresh. Yeah, so as you can see, my new model that I just trained is now here, and I can use this improved model as a production model. So I will do that, and I'll save it, and as you can see, now new updated model runs in production. Great. Now, last but not least, what I have to do is to actually test it. And there are two things that I can do here. So first of all, I can talk to a bot myself and just check that the bot works and responds. And to do that, I can head to Talk to Your Bot tab in the Rasa X UI and simply have a conversation. Because here you should get a nice chat UI where you should be able to talk to your assistant. Not exactly sure why it's taking longer this time. It should actually load immediately. Okay, it's here. Great. So I will just talk to my assistant, and I will say simple hello. So an assistant asks, hey, how are you? I will say, I am great. Yeah, so an assistant said, great, carry on. Okay, awesome. So an assistant works. If something wouldn't, I could easily switch to interactive learning here as well. Again, the same functionality. I simply click on the, for example, message that I would like to start the interactive learning session from, and then I can go straight to interactive learning session immediately and continue the conversation there. But again, as I said at the very beginning of my session, it's really not a good idea to be the only tester of your assistant. So if you want your assistant to learn the most and the best, obviously you have to include real users as soon as possible. So every time you make improvements to your bot, obviously make sure to give it to the actual users to talk to your bot and help you improve your assistant. And with Rasa X, it's really easy to do. So let me show you how that works. Again, the Conversations tab. And here you have this share icon in the UI, and what basically happens here is that you can get a link to your assistant and send it to your friends or colleagues or anyone you would like to allow to test your assistant, and then they can simply open it in their browser and talk to your bot. So let me show you how that works. You can also provide some details about your assistant. For example, what is the name of your assistant? I will call it Rasa Moodbot. You can also provide some additional details about your bot, but I will skip that for now. And if I click generate link, I get the link to my assistant. I'm running my assistant locally. Obviously, if you want to give access to your bot to your friends living in a different country or city, or who are not using your computer, obviously you would have to use, for example, ngrok to expose your assistant to the outside world, and that's also really easy to do. But I'm using things locally, so that's why you see localhost here. So I'm going to copy the link to my bot, and let me open a new tab and paste the link. And this is what your friends, colleagues, and anyone else you would like to test your assistant would see once they open the link. It's a simple chat UI that they can access anytime they have a link. And again, there is nothing to install, nothing to set up. They just simply talk to your bot. And I will do that right now. So I will say, hello. And assistant response. So it said, hey, how are you? For now, I will say I am really sad. Hey. So it sent me a picture of a cute little tiger, and I think it did help me. So did that help you? Yes, it did. I'm happy now. So that's how it works. The best part about this is that all conversations that users have with your assistant, again, will end up in the Conversations tab of the Rasa X UI. I will just probably have to refresh the page again. And yeah, you can see the conversation that I just had with an assistant. So the more users you have and the more testers you have that talk to your bot, the more conversations you will capture, and the more you will be able to add to your bot and allow to learn patterns from real conversational data. So that is the main benefit of using Rasa X. Again, I want to really emphasize that obviously Rasa X is not just a UI, and you can use a lot of things using code, for example. So if you wanted to create a custom action or something like that, obviously actually going to a file system, the one I showed here, and writing code would make much more sense than trying to do that in a UI. But for things like capturing conversational data and annotating and then using it to improve your bot and also doing model management, it is much easier in Rasa X UI. So I'm going to finish here, and I hope it was interesting and that it sparked lots of ideas what you can do, and I hope you're excited to try it out yourself. Yeah, just a few last points. Obviously, Rasa X is an early release yet, and there are so many things that we want to add and obviously improve. So if you try Rasa X today or any day after, feel free to fill out this short feedback survey that you have here. I will also post all these links in a video description after the stream, so don't worry, you don't have to write down all the links now. But if you can provide feedback in a survey that we have, that would be really useful for us to improve Rasa X so that it works best for all of you. Also, we have brand new docs, so go check it out. We have lots of new cool things about Rasa 1.0 and Rasa X, and also we published some tutorials about Rasa X and in general why we developed Rasa X. So go check it out on our blog. And if you want to learn more tips and tricks, there will be a webinar on Thursday. So we will spend entire hour diving deep into the Rasa and Rasa X. So if you have more questions and would like to learn more, I hope I'll see you there. And again, all of the links will be added to the description of the video after the stream is finished. Yeah, so thank you very much. And I think now we have some time for questions, and yeah. We have a bigger team here to answer them. So I will pass it on to Tom now.
Hello guys. So now we're going to have a Q&A session here. And in the room, of course, we still have Eusta, the head of developer relations. We have Alan, our CTO. We've also got Akila, who's the head of customer success engineering here, and Tom, who's the head of engineering. So we're going to field some of these questions. But before I even get into these, I just want to say it's honestly, the support already in the chat has just been incredible. So thanks so much for spreading your nice messages. But now we can begin with some of the questions. The first one comes from Denise Kochedikov, and he simply wants to know what's the difference between Rasa X and Rasa Platform. And I believe Tom Barklish could perhaps just field this question. Sorry, pass it on to Alan.
Cool. So the question is, what's the difference between Rasa X and Rasa Platform? For those who don't know, Rasa Platform until today was our commercial product, and that's been replaced by Rasa X Enterprise Edition. So Rasa X has community and enterprise versions, and our ambition for it is that Rasa X Community Edition gives you all the tools that you need to build great AI assistants if you're an indie developer or a startup or an NGO or anything like that. And the Enterprise Edition gives you all the features that you need if you're a company running it in production and at scale. So that's the distinction. So Rasa Platform has been replaced by the enterprise version of Rasa X.
Okay, thank you. And Kitan Sonaji Hao wants to just know, are the conversations persisted? Are they in a database or will they be in memory? Akila, do you want to field this one?
Sure, yeah. So the conversations are persisted to an SQL database. Like locally, there's a light version of that. And yeah, so you'll never lose those.
One quick addition to that. So the conversations you saw that kind of outside people have with your bot, they're stored in an SQL database. But as you saw in Eusta's tutorial, you can also annotate data and create new stories and create new NLU data. And what we try to achieve locally is that when you run Rasa X locally, it will store that data into your local files as well. So you'll end up with your NLU examples in your NLU.md or kind of the place where you store your NLU data, and your stories as you're used to in your kind of stories file, so that you can even edit them in that normal file while using Rasa at the same time.
Okay. Next up, Paba Anu Barathi wants to know, I'm using an external API for responses. Can I set up a webhook using Rasa X? Let's come again.
Yes. So you can still configure your normal Rasa as you did before, right? So we merged Rasa NLU and Core, but you can still configure your endpoints, for example, your response generation with our merged Rasa release. And you can also use that together with Rasa X. That should work fine, yeah.
Okay. Next up, Michael H. just wants to know simply, will there be a Docker image with Rasa X?
Yes.
Thanks, Tom, again.
That's an easy one, yes. So we published one. We're currently testing it, but it looks good. So we'll either have it today or tomorrow, but it's in the works.
Cool. Lapis Unbi wants to know, does Rasa X export training files or models? Yeah, you still feed this one.
It does. So, for example, I can maybe even show you, in my example that I did, so when I trained the model, it is also saved locally as a zip file, and as Tom mentioned, with the data, it is also automatically saved as local files, as MD, for example, NLU.md or stories.md files, and you can find them there. So.
Cool. We've got one here from Luciano van der Veekens, who just wants to know, now that NLU and Core are merged into Rasa 1.0, can they still be scaled independently? Tom will field this one.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you can still run kind of NLU or core only models with the combined repository and kind of combined code base. We'll only provide one Docker container that kind of hosts both of them, but obviously you can run NLU and core separately. The question still is, though, if that makes sense, which it kind of depends on your deployment environment, because every request kind of goes through core and NLU once, so you kind of have similar scaling requirements for both of them. So in the end, it might make sense to just have one container having a combined model and scaling that. But really, it depends on kind of your deployment environment. But yeah, it's possible to also scale them independently as well.
One here from Digital Breed. Does it work on Windows OS 2? And I can tell you that yes, it's completely OS independent. So yeah, it's possible on any OS. Okay. So Greg Stevens here. I organize stories in NLU in separate files. Does Rasa X provide some sort of organization of the data? Yeah, Alan will take this.
So currently, you won't see that organization reflected in the UI, but Rasa X will respect the way that you organized your files. So if you add some more training data and then save and close Rasa X, they'll be added to the place where they were originally. So if you modify a story, it'll get saved back to the original file that it was in.
Cool. Okay. Keep the questions coming, guys. So Maurizio Nils just wants to know, is it possible to have multiple bots, so multiple models? Anyone feel this one? Alan will take this one.
Sure. So Rasa X, you just run in the directory where you have your domain file and your training data. So if you have separate directories for each of your projects, you run Rasa X in them, you'll have a fully isolated environment for each project. It's not possible currently to have like one Rasa X UI and one Rasa X server that serves multiple projects. That's not possible right now.
Cool. Of course, another one here, an important question. So Caleb Kaliris wants to know, is this part of the Rasa repository? Tom?
No, it's separate. So as Alan described in the beginning, we'll still have kind of Rasa, which is kind of our merged NLU and core code base. So that's on GitHub under Rasa HQ/Rasa. And what kind of used to showed the Rasa X parts, the UI and kind of the server that's running that are kind of distributed separately as a separate Python package. And they are free, but at the moment they are not open source.
Okay, Al Mehdi Marhu here just wants to know, how easy is it to migrate to Rasa X? I think Yusuf can tell you more about that.
Yeah, so I would say it's quite easy. So there are just a few things you really have to do. Is one, you will have to upgrade to Rasa 1.0, and another one is really just to either make sure that your project structure follows the one that Rasa X expects, and the only requirements are that your data files should be in a data directory. But if you don't have it, then you can also still pass files specifically by providing path where your data files are, and that's all you need. Actually, I just published a tutorial on that, step-by-step tutorial how to migrate your existing bot to Rasa X. So it's already on the Rasa blog, and you can check it out to get more details on that. But yeah, it's quite easy.
Cool. A more technical bot-based development question here is just, what is the best way to do performance testing of Rasa-based bots?
Okay, I'll take that one. So, I mean, as with kind of every web page, it's pretty similar. So you should kind of test your bot in a similar scenario. So deploy it on the environment that is kind of your production environment or kind of a similar setup. that has similar CPU and memory requirements. And then once that's done, use like standard to like Apache Bench, or there's a couple Python scripts we use that we kind of put together to test the performance requirements of how many users we can actually handle with a single instance of Rasa running. So we'll probably do a blog post or something around that as well in the future.
Just a quick clarification here from Sushil. She just says Rasa X is an add-on on top of Rasa Core and NLU platform. It's not a replacement for Rasa Core or the NLU platform. Alan will take that.
Yep, that's exactly correct. So Rasa, the open source framework, is there for understanding messages, for holding conversations, for connecting to messaging channels. And what Rasa X is there for is basically monitoring and filtering your conversations and turning them into training data. So it doesn't replace anything that Rasa does.
Okay. Rahul Tongia just wants to know what's additional in Rasa X Enterprise as compared to the community version.
That's a great question as well. So what we offer in the enterprise version today is extra security features. So we have single sign-on integration. We have role-based access control so that different users have different levels of permissions on the training data and the models, etc. And we also have multiple deployment environments. So in the community edition, you can promote models to production. In the enterprise version, you can promote models to development, staging, and production instances. And the enterprise version also has an analytics tab where you can see analytics of what everybody's doing chatting to your bot.
Thank you, Alan. Shota Giorgibiani. Sorry about that. What about backward compatibility between Rasa 1.0 and existing Rasa NLU and core versions? Tom?
So it's a major new release. So we try to make it as easy as possible to migrate from the existing releases 0.14 and 0.15 of core and NLU. But there are a couple incompatibilities. And we try to explain that in detail in the documentation. So there's a separate migrations part of the documentation that explains in detail how to get from the 0.x releases to 1.0. We made that step to 1.0 to make clear that we arrived at a stage where we are sure that we can keep compatibility up in a better way than we did in the past, and to make kind of transitioning and updating easier.
Thanks, Tom. Nikolai Opris here. Does it support multiple parallel conversations?
Yeah, so if I've understood the question correctly, it's can multiple test users or other users be talking to your bot at the same time? And yes, the answer is they can.
Okay, guys. I can only take one more question here. Okay, Nikolai Opus again. He just wants to know, why not open source the Rasa X UI? Alan?
Sure. So we decided to make the community edition free to download, but we decided not to open source it for now. And if you want to understand more about our business model and why that is and why that works, we've got a page on the website about how we make money, how our business model works. So I'll share the link after the webinar, so you can sort of read about that and ask any further questions you have.
Cool. And with that, guys, I'm just going to draw this presentation to a close. Once again, a really huge thank you from myself and the rest of the team at Rasa for joining the stream. But more importantly, joining us on this journey, because Rasa and Rasa X just wouldn't be possible without you guys. All your contributions, your support, it's overwhelming to be working with you guys. So make a buzz about this. On Twitter, you can use the hashtag RasaX, and Rasa 1.0, including Rasa X, is available right now. So check out blog.rasa.com to begin using it immediately. I'm really, really excited to see what you build with it, so keep in touch. Okay, that's all from us today. Goodbye, everyone.